We're now streaming live on YouTube. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the meeting today. Just a quick note, if I may. I'm Councillor Andrew Kilbride. I'm stepping in for the chairman of the Development Control Committee, which is Councillor Mercer on this occasion. Councillor Mercer was a member of the Cabinet at the time of the meeting, and so as for a risk of perception of determination, he stepped to one side for this particular item, so he will not be taking part in this meeting whatsoever. So that's for Andy Mercer, the chairman. So I'm taking over today, so I'm Andy Kilbride. To ensure the smooth running of the meeting, I would ask that all mobile phones are switched to silent, please, or if you can, turn them off. I would also like you to keep your microphones muted if you can, please. The meeting will operate in the following way. The Development Control Manager will introduce each item relating to applications and then summarise the main points. Members of the public who have registered to speak will then be invited to address the committee one at a time. And members of the committee will have the opportunity to clarify any points raised during their address. Once all the public speakers have completed their statement in the meeting, the DCM or appropriate person will respond with the appropriate comments made. Members of the committee will be given the opportunity to ask further questions regarding the application. Members of the committee will make any comments they wish to regarding this application. Once all the matters have been thoroughly debated, I will ask the committee to vote on the application based on recommendations of the report. Should a member lose their connection, I will adjourn the meeting whilst we try to get them back into the meeting and ensure they have heard all the relevant facts before making the final decision. Members have been given a number to use in case you struggle with any technical difficulties. So please, if you haven't got it, please let me know. As this meeting is expected to be a long time, I will offer a comfort break at an appropriate time. So the item one is apologies for any attendance, if any. Are we all here? Any apologies?
Yeah, apologies from Councillor Andy Mercer.
Yeah, that's noted. Thank you. Moving on to item 2. Notification request for members of the public to address the meeting. We've got quite a few members of the public willing to speak, and I won't name all here, but we'll do later on. Members of the public also had the opportunity to submit written statements in advance of the meeting. Can all the councillors confirm that they received the letters and read the letters from the following people, please? Letter from Councillor Judy Shepherd, letter from Councillor Sam Rumans, Councillor Aziz Eels Kilby-Shaw, and the speaking notes to comment to be made at the meeting from Matthew Dale Harris. I noticed that was on the email this morning, just for members. Comments from Steve, sorry. Okay. Comments from Steve Miller against the application and comments from Mr. Phil Letts, the campaign officer at CT Northampton. Have members been able to read all that information?
Chairman, there's one who sent it, the attachment as a .odt file. I did advise him I can't open ODT files, but he hasn't converted it, so I haven't read that one.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I haven't read the information that came out this morning. I've had problems with my problems with my PC earlier today, which I've now fixed.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay, thank you very much. Item 3, declaration of members' interest, if any, and declaration of whip, if any. Councillors are asked to note that under the new code of conduct, they only need to declare an interest at the start of the meeting. If that interest has not been recorded in the register of interests, and if any councillor declares such an interest, they must add it to the register within 28 days of the meeting. Council should be reminded of the seriousness of not declaring a disclosable pecuniary interest if a councillor declares such an interest. They must remove themselves or herself from the whole of the item, irrespective of whether they are a member of the committee or not. When declaring an interest, councillors are asked to state the following: the item number of which they have the interest, the nature of the interest, and whether the interest is a disclosable pecuniary.
Join the meeting.
Disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory interest. Are we all happy with that? Any declarations?
Yes, Chairman, when I was a Boughton Green councillor, I was an observer at WASPRA meetings, but purely observer, never a member. It's just an other interest, not disclosable one.
Thank you, Councillor Lorman. Anyone else? No? Okay, thank you very much. Item 4, Chairman announcements, if any. I'm going to explain the following. If a member of the public should lose their connection, the following process will be followed. If you lose your connection, you'll move on to the next public speaker to allow time for that person to rejoin the meeting. Once that person has rejoined the meeting, they may be invited to continue their address for the amount of time they have left remaining at the time they lost connection, and after all the others have made their addresses. If they are unable to reconnect to the meeting, any points raised up until the point of the lost connection will be taken into account by the committee. If a member of the committee should lose the connection, I'll pause the meeting for a short while to enable you to rejoin the meeting as well. The length of time, if after a reasonable length of time the member is unable to rejoin the meeting, we will continue assuming that we are quorate, and we are quorate today. If that member is then able to rejoin, they will not be able to participate in the vote for that item. Is that okay, members? Okay. Item 5, meeting held on the 4th of August 2020. Can I agree the accuracy of the minutes of that meeting, please?
Agreed.
Agreed?
Fine.
Chairman, I have a couple of corrections that need to be made.
Thank you, Jill. Can you let us know those, please?
Yeah, page 8, top line, it says a railway bride, and I think that should say bridge. Okay. On page 11, in the middle of the page, this had been a comment, it should be theme rather than these. On the next page, the first from last paragraph, it says the application and it should say applicant. And on page 13, the section starting a member of the committee asked, which is under all the bullet points, it says at the same time for, and it should say at the same time or.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is the
Anything
office?
else?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, members?
No.
Okay. Can we get those amendments amended into the minutes? If that is applicable, please.
Yes, Chair, if the committee are content with those amendments, we'll do that.
Okay. And if that's said, done, can we sign those off? Are we all in favour of that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item 6A. This is a planning application for the construction of new roads for Northampton North West Relief Road on land south of the A5 119. Northampton Road between the Brampton Health Growth Centre and the River Nene, including 2 new roundabouts and links bridging over the River Nene to Brampton Lane and over the Northampton Loop of the West Coast Main Line to connect with Darlington Grange at land off the A5 199 Northampton Road. I will now ask Mr. Phil Watson to present the report and to summarise the issues. If I can ask you to take over there, Phil. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, well, we've got a long report here, and I'll try and go through it and summarise matters. I won't cover everything in my presentation. Clearly, everything in the report is important, but I'll try and pick out some of the pertinent points. But if you feel I've missed anything, obviously, please raise questions in due course or any matters that you wish. Turning to page 3, regarding the proposal, you've outlined the basics of the proposal. Paragraph 3.1 makes the point that this road is planned to be linked the A428 Harleston Road with the A5 199 Welford Road. And it's intended to improve the highway network and help to address traffic problems in Northampton and surrounding villages. It provides additional capacity on the road, will help to enable development, including the major sustainable urban extension at Buckton Fields, Darlington Grange and Northampton West. The section from the A428 to the roundabout near Grange Farm, just south of the railway, will be constructed by the developers of Darlington Grange as a single carriageway. And the first part of this section has already been constructed as part of the Harleston Gate development. And the County Council will be responsible for building the section of road across the railway line, reach the A5 199 road, Welford Road, and therefore it submitted this application. So the application, the County Council is seeking to planning permission to construct a new single carriageway road, which will be approximately 1.9 kilometres in length. And the new road will connect into a new roundabout at the Sandy Lane junction with the A5 199. That's the Northampton Welford Road. Before connecting to the roundabout at the Brampton Lane junction with the A5 199 Welford Road. We should look at some plans in a moment, Chair, and we can see that on plan. We'll share those with you. To the south of the new road, we'll connect into the Darlington Grange roundabout, a new roundabout east of Grange Farm, which will provide access to the proposed Darlington Grange residential development, which includes a link to the A428 at Harleston Road and the new Sandy Lane. The proposed railway scheme will also include a railway overbridge, culverts, earthworks, embankments, balancing ponds and other accommodation works. And there's further details about the scheme in paragraph 3.3 and onwards. But if we could have a look at some plans, which we can share with you in a moment, we'd be able to just highlight the route of the scheme. It's obviously important to make the point this is linked to growth development in Northampton, planned development, some of which has already started to take place, and others which yet is to be completed. So it's fundamentally linked to growth agenda for Northamptonshire and this part of Northampton and Daventry district. So the first plan that we've shared with you is just the application plan. You can see it's quite a wide area. Just so you don't get fooled, north is on the right-hand side of the plan. It's been twisted round. So north isn't the plan, that's the west. So the railway line can be seen on the southern side, which is on the left-hand side of the plan, as you can see it. That's the railway line running from east to west. That's the live line, but it also, on the edge of Northampton, the disused railway line, the Brampton Valley line, which bounds the built development of Northampton. The wide areas that are shown on that southern side by the main line, those are areas where there's going to be a series of lagoons, which we'll show you on one of the subsequent plans in relation to drainage, which is not only for drainage in relation to this scheme, but it's also fundamentally linked to Darlington Grange development. And there's a huge benefit in that, in so much as the material that will be taken out of the lagoons for construction can be used for construction of the embankments for the road scheme itself, which is a huge saving in sustainability terms on transport and traffic, in relation to the amount of material that would otherwise have to be brought in. So if we look to the general arrangement plan, we can get a better idea of how where the road fits within that red line. So there you are. You can see this is what's called the general arrangement. The route of the road is running from south to north in that sort of dark green swathe with the grey colour signifying the road surface itself. You can see the lagoons that I was referring to on the southern side, either side of the main railway line. And if you look to the right-hand side of the plan, which is in the north, you can see the two roundabouts that I was referring to in the description, one which links to the Welford Road and other to what was described in the document as the Northampton Road, but they're both part of what was the Welford Road originally. So the part of the Welford Road will be diverted and part of it will be truncated. So there's a new causeway will have to be built across the valley to link the two roundabouts. And but the truncated road will be on the north side of that, which would still be used for pedestrian and cycling access. If we look at the restoration plan, there's another one to come up, but there we go. I mean, it's not hugely dissimilar, but it shows that the areas are to be planted. And obviously, if you were to look at the key on the left-hand side, you could see all the symbols. We don't need to look into it now. There's a schedule of planting across the top of the plan. So there's substantial planting to go either side of the road itself, and there will be the particular meadows and grasslands also planted in relation to the green areas around the lagoons and any other green areas that exist in relation to the scheme across the valley there on the northern side. So it's for just looking at the route of the road. One other point to make, of course, is it's been tucked away as far from Northampton built development as possible. That assists with minimizing and mitigating the disturbance from noise and air pollution. The golf course is to the west. That's at the top of the plan. So it skirts the edge of the valley, if you like. So in places it's nearer to the valley bottom, and in places it's just up the side of the valley, linking next to the golf course, which already has a substantial screen of trees between it and the current agricultural land. And of course, that's going to be supplemented with further planting in relation to this scheme as well. So that's the gist of the scheme, Chair. If we move back to the report, we can leave a plan up if you wish. Actually, no, perhaps not, because obviously it will dominate the screen. Moving back to section 4 of the report, I just want to briefly outline that this application is subject to environmental impact assessment, and so there's been a substantial amount of information submitted, and all the reports are available to see online. And of course, there's been some further information submitted following Regulation 25 requests, and that's all online as well and available for everyone to see. Section 5 deals with the consultation process. The Northampton Borough Council haven't objected to the application in principle. There are made some comments, including from their environmental health officer regarding controlling air quality impacts and noise. Similarly, Daventry District Council haven't objected in principle, and similarly their environmental health officer has made comments about obviously endeavouring to mitigate noise and air quality as much as possible. There are a number of objections, particularly from the parish councils, and you're going to hear oral representations from them. It's covered in detail in the report, and therefore I won't go through those in detail, but we will have seen those, and you will hear further comments on those from speakers. When we look at the Environment Agency, they were consulted as well. They initially objected. They required more information on modelling, because obviously we're going across the floodplain. That modelling work was undertaken, and they were now satisfied in that respect. There does remain one outstanding matter in relation to increased flood risk for one residential property, but we feel that that can be dealt with appropriately by conditions. It's a minor technical matter, and we proposed a condition on that, and I've also covered it further in section 783 to 786 of the report, and that therefore has been dealt with. But we are pointing out that there is still this technical matter with the Environment Agency to finalise, but that can be dealt with by condition. When we move on to the assessment section of the report, there's a thorough assessment provided. Now, actually, before I do that, just to make the point, Chair, before I finish on the consultations, in relation to public advertisement and neighbour notification, I'm reading from paragraph 569 just at the moment. We had 212 letters of representation. Obviously, there's been a few more that have been received this morning or in the last few days, and those are being referred to. There's also a representation received by Philip Gray, who I believe is also registered to speak. So his views will be expressed already. And I think you've got all the other ones that were mentioned by the chairman. So there have been a lot of objections. People are concerned about this road, but at the same time, obviously, we're dealing with a road which it has been identified as being required for the growth agenda for Northampton. So as I was saying, in terms of the assessment section, we've listed all the relevant policies. I will quickly flag up that there is another document produced by Daventry District Council, the Settlement and Countryside Local Plan Part 2, which is between December 2011 and 2029. That doesn't say anything substantive about the road. It does mention that these road schemes, and it does say that, in fact, in that plan, that an application has already been submitted for the Northwest Relief Road. Paragraph 7.2 of the report deals with the development plan, and it makes the point that this is linked to the key sustainable urban extension of Dallington Grange, which I've already said. Table 7 lists the key primary infrastructure projects required to be delivered, and this proposed scheme, the Northwest, it's referred to as the Northwest Bypass, but it is one of the 5 schemes that are identified in that plan. Policy N12 of the Northampton Transport Network Improvements Policy sets out that the route improvements that are intended to be delivered, and this includes the Northwest Bypass. And in fact, Policy N7 of the West Northampton Joint Core Strategy states, amongst other requirements, that the development of the sustainable urban extension will include provision of land or part of, along with the financial contribution to the Northwest Bypass. The policy also states the necessary infrastructure is required to be phased alongside the delivery of this development. And Dallington Grange has programmed for 3,000 dwellings over 7.2 hectares. So the intricate link between this road as a piece of essential infrastructure and the growth agenda is clearly outlined in the development plan.
Chair, apologies for interrupting Mr. Watson. I need to advise you that Councillor McCutcheon is in the room with us. He's joined us just at the start of Phil's presentation. So he is here with me in the room. And so if he debates, if he wishes to join the debate or asking questions, I'll let you know.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. The report goes on to look at all of the different impacts obviously traffic and transport is one of the most significant impacts in relation to the consultee and representations received. There are other impacts which I'll come to as well in the report, and that this has been looked at in detail. The application has included a transport assessment, a transport assessment addendum, and now a revised transport assessment. So there's been substantial work done by the applicant in relation to the impacts in relation to traffic through modelling. And there have been a lot of representations made that the concerns that the impacts of, particularly on Boughton Village, have not been adequately addressed in the modelling work that's being done. This has been back to the applicant who have responded by confirming that in their view that the work that has been done is robust, and the Highway Authority has seen the comments from the applicant and has also confirmed that it is consent that it concurs with the findings of the applicant in relation to traffic modelling. So there's been substantial work and detailed consideration undertaken by not only the applicant but by the Highway Authority, who advise ourselves as the planning authority in relation to this matter. Chris Bond from the Highway Authority is available to answer questions if need be at some stage in relation to the application, Chair.
Thank you.
Can I just go on and just pick up a few of the other points which I mentioned, Chair? I'm just looking at one point I want to point in paragraph 8.2 of the report, which is in the summary and conclusions, because this is a nice area just to pick up the gist of the points in relation to the detail in the report. It does say that there are still ongoing discussions in paragraph 8.2 with both the Highway Authority and the Environment Agency.
Yeah.
That the Highway Authority discussions have been completed, as I just alluded to. I think it wasn't taken out from the previous edit of the report that, from the 4th of August document. Those have now been resolved. The Environment Agency, as I say, has very minor technical issues in relation to a residential property, which can be dealt with by a condition, and you will see a planning condition proposed in relation to how that property can achieve flood resilience and defence, and a scheme has to be submitted before any works can be undertaken in the floodplain that would impact on floodwater flows. In relation to the other impacts, the report does acknowledge that it will cause noise impacts, and some existing resident dwellings obviously will notice noise from the road. It also has some impact in terms of air quality, and it also has some impact in relation to the impact on landscape. So these are negative factors which will occur, but it's inevitable if you're going to build a road which is going to have traffic on, that there will be impacts in relation to those factors. In relation to the weight to be put to those impacts, obviously that needs to be in the planning balance, but there is substantial support in the development plan for this scheme, and on that basis the planning balance issues are that come out in favour, in our view, of allowing the scheme. The scheme under construction will have a negative interference on the character of the area, clearly, but again those landscape impacts need to be weighed with the advantages of providing a scheme that's identified in the plan. Biodiversity is also dealt with in the report, and there's going to be a requirement for net gain. This has been made clear to the applicant, and there's a detailed set of conditions to ensure this can be delivered, even if it involves further work by the County Council elsewhere. Just one other point to make, that the Northampton to Market Harborough line, that has been, issues have been raised in relation to whether or not that might open at some stage. Clearly there is no programme or identified scheme in relation to opening that road, and therefore we don't think that can have any material weight against the application. It is a material consideration, but it doesn't have any significant weight this road doesn't make it any more difficult, in our view, for reopening that line. It would still have to be dealt with how they would cross the public highway if ever that was to come forward. And in relation to the Brampton Heath Golf Course, there's concerns about whether or not there needs to be any additional noise or fencing requirements. There's no requirement for that to be achieved. The golf course already has substantial tree-lined cover down the boundary with the road, and indeed there's been negotiations about some realignment of the course to enable it to make it even less likely that any impact would accrue in relation to balls not going towards the road. So just to conclude, Chair, obviously there's a lot of matters. The conclusion of this road gives great weight. The fact that it's in the West Northamptonshire Joint Course Strategy gives great weight to permitting this scheme. The NPPF makes it clear that where development is in accordance with the development, it should be approved unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And on balance, even though there are some negative impacts, these are inevitable with a new road, and that our view is that this application should be approved, and that the subject, of course, to the conditions that are proposed, which will mitigate the impacts that do occur in relation to the development. Yeah, I think that's outlined the report for you. A lot of detail there, but clearly you may have comments, and you've got quite a few speakers to hear as well.
Thank you very much, Phil. Right then, if we can move on now to the speakers, Paul. Can we start letting the speakers in one by one, please?
Chair, my colleague James is going to
Was James doing it?
move speakers in and out of the
Yeah.
meeting.
Through you, Chair. I don't know if you wish me to just run through the list of registered speakers in advance of hearing from each of them, just so the committee is aware of the position.
Yes, please, James.
Okay, thank you. So we have registered to speak at the meeting this morning, Mr. Matthew Dale Harris, who's speaking on behalf of Boughton Parish Council, Mr. Nigel Weeks, again on behalf of Boughton Parish Council, Councillor Mrs. Charlotte McInnes, who's a member of Boughton Parish Council, Councillor Judy Shepherd of the County Council, Mr. Sean Brady of the White Hills and Spring Park Residents Association, Mr. Steve Miller, again of White Hills and Spring Park Resident Association, although I don't see him in the list of speakers in the waiting room. Mr. John Cutler, Councillor Sam Rumans of the County Council, Mr. Simon Barber, Mr. Philip Gray, mentioned earlier, although again, not in the waiting room at present, and then Mr. Patrick Cross and Mr. Robin Ailes. So if you're happy to proceed, Chair, I'll admit the first speaker, Mr. Matthew Dale Harris.
Yes, please, James. Hello, Mr. Harris, are you there?
He's muted at the moment, Chair.
Okay, you have to unmute yourself, Mr. Harris.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair. Can you hear me?
I can now, Mr. Harris. Mr. Harris, thank you for attending this morning. You have 3 minutes to tell us why you're against the application. And then after the application, council can ask questions to you as well, just for clarification, if that's all right. Okay, off you go, Mr. Harris. Thank you very much.
Am I? Oh.
Are you ready?
Sorry, Chair. I'm just checking that I think I'm getting a feedback loop from having the YouTube open at the same time. Is that now operating?
It is indeed, yes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning. As explained, my name is Matthew Dale Harris. I'm a barrister instructed by Lee Day. Hopefully the members of the committee will have a note, my speaking note, which they might have had a chance to have a look at. I'll be followed by Mr. Weeks, who's also speaking for the Parish Council, and Councillor Macness. Mr. Weeks, of course, is a qualified transport consultant, so please focus any questions on the technical details to him. On behalf of the Parish Council, I wish to emphasise two main points, which flow from the detailed responses that Lee Day has already made on behalf of the Parish Council. The first is to re-emphasise the Parish Council's deep concern about the quality of the technical work that underpins its application, and the potential legal consequences of those deficits. Those deficits have been identified throughout the Parish Council's responses, and we are frankly quite surprised that the applicant hasn't taken the opportunity of the adjournment to address this. Mr. Watson, in summarising the position, emphasised that the applicant, through WSP, their consultants, have done substantial work since the application was submitted. But the real question is, are there still gaps? And we're concerned that this is a position where the council, the applicant, is effectively leaning on an expert judgment without really engaging with the substance of what we're saying. And particularly in a case where they've refused to take up the offer of a virtual meeting with the Parish Council during the adjournment. As was made clear before the last meeting, our primary concern in terms of deficit is that there is no proper modelling, no adequate modelling of the operation of the network with the new mitigation now proposed for the Vice Road roundabout in place. So there's new mitigation proposed for the Vice roundabout that addresses the concerns that we previously identified about the operation of that roundabout. It's along additional lane that's being put in, and that's modelled to make a huge difference to the operation of that roundabout, which is going to have the effect, we think, of diverting a very significant amount of extra traffic into the village. We know that the previous iteration still allowed for an increase of over 400 movements through the village in the peak hour as a result of the scheme as an overall. And we are very concerned, the Parish Council is very concerned that the situation might be much worse than that if the constraints that we have identified are now removed. We say that the response laid out in WSP's document is unconvincing. I've given you the reference in my speaking note. They say that in their view that these changes are unlikely to be significant, but that's flatly... Apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Apologies, sir.
That's okay. Thank you very much for that. Councillors, does anybody have any questions to ask of Mr. Harris or anything clarifying? Okay, I don't see anybody asking anything there, Mr. Harris. So thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you, sir.
I very much appreciate that. Thank you. James, if we can go to the next speaker then, please.
Yes, so the next speaker is Mr. Nigel Weeks, and I will admit him now.
Good morning, Mr. Weeks. Are you able to hear us okay?
He needs to unmute.
Sorry, can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
We can indeed now, Mr. Weeks. Thank you for attending this morning.
Pleasure.
Thank you for your time. So you've got 3 minutes if you can, please. And then
Right.
afterwards, the councillors will ask you any relevant questions.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Weeks, thank you very much.
Right.
Through you, Chair, just before Mr. Weeks commences, it may be helpful if I say I can give him an indication when there's 1 minute left, and I will indicate when he's had his 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. Mr. Weeks? over to you.
Okay. My name is Nigel Weeks and I'm a transport planning consultant with Stirling Maynard Transportation with over 30 years experience. I've been appointed by Bourton Parish Council to review the various transport assessments produced to justify the relief road, and my report has been submitted by the Parish Council and is referred to in the latest Northamptonshire correspondence. The overwhelming conclusion is that the mitigation package proposed for the acknowledged impact on Boughton is totally inadequate and poorly assessed and cannot be used to justify granting planning permission for the relief road. I will expand briefly on this conclusion, but firstly, I must use part of my 3 minutes to point out a serious misrepresentation in the committee reports. In paragraph 5.30, which is within the section dealing with the Highway Authority's response, it states that as a result of the amended roundabout design for the relief road, the only meaningful queue is on Vice Road. This is incorrect, as there's also a significant and larger queue on Brampton Lane. It further states that extra traffic and growth is due to the development themselves, not to the Western Relief Road. Within the Bourton area, the extra traffic is purely from the traffic redistribution as a result of the relief road. Without the road, the Vice Road roundabout operates within capacity and it's only the redistribution that puts it over. Finally, it states there's a slight reduction in traffic approaching from Vice Road. In fact, there is an increase on the Vice Road approach with the ring road in place. It would appear, therefore, that the Highway Authority's comments are based on a misunderstanding of what is outlined in the transport assessment. Moving on to the Vice Road roundabout, without mitigation, there are huge queues and delays at the roundabout in 2031 with the relief road construction. These queues are over 800 vehicles on Bampton Lane and up to 350 vehicles on Vice Road, with corresponding huge delays. The proposed mitigation scheme apparently removes all these queues and delays. To state that a change of this magnitude does not warrant a rerun of the model to test its impact and that it can be handled by detailed local modelling is not credible. The previous rerun showed that the major redistribution caused by improvements to the relief road junctions and the impact would be significant, and the same will happen here. For example, will the roundabout now function properly, or will new traffic be attracted to the junction, causing delays to build up again? Without a rerun of the model, we simply don't know. Next, the impact on Bourton Village itself. Even with the high queues and delays at the Vice Road roundabout, the latest model run shows an increase of over 400 vehicles in the peak hour, a large increase. Apparently, if you remove the delays at the roundabout, which will make the route significantly more attractive, although we don't know how much without a model run, this can be completely mitigated by putting in place just 2 pinch points. That simply isn't credible. Finally, I note we should be reassured that a monitoring programme will be put in place for Boughton, including Button Fields. This is to be welcomed, but does nothing to overcome the lack of detailed study and analysis in the first place. I would therefore suggest... Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Weeks. Much appreciated. Councillors, does anybody have any questions, please, for Mr. Weeks?
Yes, please, Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Mr. Weeks what he would suggest.
Well, the first thing I would suggest is that the Northamptonshire Highways took up our offer of a meeting to discuss the situation. And then I think that it needs a more detailed study, including a model rerun, to get a measure of the problem we're dealing with. Because I repeat, if you have large delays at the Vice Road roundabout and an increase in large delays at the Vice Road roundabout causing an increase of 400 vehicles. If there are no delays at that roundabout, I dread to think what the increase should be. So I'd like to see a model run to see what the impact is. I'd like a meeting with the Highway Authority to discuss that. And then I think it needs more detailed study, which unfortunately Bourton Parish Council don't have the budget for, of a much more significant scheme that would attempt to mitigate the problem. At the moment, we don't even know for sure what the scale of the problem is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors? No, that's it. Well, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. James, if you could let the next speaker in, please.
Yeah, so next we have Councillor Mrs. Charlotte McInnes of Boughton Parish Council. I'll just admit her.
Good morning, Mrs. McInnes. Can you hear me all right?
Oh, yes, I can hear you fine. Thank you.
Good morning to you. Thank you very much for taking part in the meeting. We have 3 minutes to enable you to get your point across. James will come in after 2 minutes and say there's 1 minute left. That's okay.
Of course.
So over to you, Mrs. McInnes. Thank you.
Boughton is a village of 400 or so houses. It is a proper community with a thriving school, village hall, park and pub. The parish also includes the new development of Buckton Fields, which will eventually reach over 1,000 dwellings when complete. The impact of the North West Relief Road will be catastrophic, but our objections to this scheme are not simply parochial. No matter how many times consultants tweak this application, volume of vehicles exceeds roads capacity. For all the pages of bamboozling technical jargon in the TA, the true impacts, beneficial or negative, of this scheme can't be known because it has not been tested thoroughly. So I'm at a loss to see how anyone can claim a scheme represents value for money when its impacts are unknown. The Local Highways Authority response to points raised by the Parish Council experts and the request for a total rerun of the model runs to pages, but says very little of substance. If you don't want to know the answer, don't ask the question. Is this not the real reason this model has not been rerun properly? Those in Boughton already live with the reality of high volumes of traffic. Daily, cars mount pavements and drive over lawns to get through the gridlock, damaging property and endangering the lives of pedestrians, including the many children who walk to the village school. The TA predicts these already high volumes will increase by 50% in our village with this scheme. In 2031, with the road, the wait at the roundabout at the top of Vise Road is predicted to be a queue of 235 cars. By conservative estimates, that's a queue of 1.2 kilometres, pretty much all the way through the village. Residents will find themselves penned into their houses by traffic or queuing to pull into their own drives. Such severe impacts warranted extensive and radical mitigation. What has been offered is derisory and not tested. Buckton Fields has been totally overlooked. The TA predicts queues along Brampton Lane of 613 vehicles in the morning, over 3.3 kilometres, a 38-minute wait. Inevitably, motorists will rat run down Home Farm Drive in Buckton Fields. When WSP is wearing the hat of, in effect, both applicant and the Local Highways Authority, how can residents or you, committee members, have confidence that this application has been scrutinised properly? The road is not the North West Bypass. It isn't even a relief road. It will be a car park in peak times, a North West Grief Road. Please don't.
Oh, have we lost Mrs. McInnes, James?
It appears so, Chair. She did mention before the meeting that her connection wasn't the most reliable. We can pause briefly to see if her system restores itself. She did only have 15 seconds of her allotted time remaining.
Even so, I think we just need to pause it
Sure.
just for a few moments. Thank you.
What we might do, Chair, is proceed with the next speaker, Councillor Mackiness will logically be attempting to rejoin the meeting. You could then bring her in for her remaining allotted time as soon as we have her back, if that would be acceptable.
That's acceptable to me. Thank you very much.
Okay. The next speaker then is Councillor Judy Shepherd, who we have present in front of us already.
Thank you, Chairman. I hope you can hear me.
Mhm.
Lovely.
Good morning, Judy.
Morning. Good morning to you all.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Chairman, I'd like to thank all the members of the DC meeting, and especially Councillor Lawman, for the consideration shown at the last meeting to defer this item subject to the Saturn modelling being rerun and other matters being resolved. I was therefore, as you can understand, very disappointed that it was not considered necessary for Saturn to be rerun, as I believe the results would have been very telling in a negative way on the actual impact on the very picturesque village of Boughton and its historic conservation centre. I must admit, Boughton Parish looks on the completion of the new road with absolute dread. I note, and I'm grateful for the additional new conditions to be added to the report, and I'm pleased to note that the stress and substantial increase of traffic on this road will bring on Boughton Village has at last been properly acknowledged. It does not, though, make the traffic go away, and we will have to live with a very busy, smelly, noisy, fume-ridden, nitrous oxide, for instance, future environment as the Northern Orbital Road, which was, as you recall, to be built in tandem with this planning application, is just a future pipe dream and effectively mothballed. The proposal that the applicant is to work with Boughton Parish Council prior to any scheme being agreed is to be applauded. And I know that Boughton Parish Council will be willing and very willing to cooperate and play an active role in all future considerations. I am sorry that the Buckton Fields Spine Road has been omitted from the debate, as there are very real concerns by Boughton Parish Council and Buckton Fields residents over the future abuse of a rat run. I would be grateful, therefore, if a DC committee would consider perhaps making an additional condition so that the Spine Road is included in any future updated remodelling and traffic calming proposals to protect its many residents from the envisaged nightmare.
1 minute, yeah.
Thank you. Finally, I would like a condition guarantee that future monitoring of any new traffic calming measures is ensured for a set period. This is so that any proposals that are put in place during discussion with Boughton Parish Council, which fall short on delivery and expectations, can be fine-tuned and strengthened as necessary. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor. Fellow councillors, do you have any questions for Councillor Shepherd?
Yes, please, Chairman.
Yeah, fire away.
Perhaps Councillor Shepherd could elucidate on the consultations with Boughton Parish Council and their standing. I mean, is her understanding just that these will relate to the mitigation measures in Boughton Parish Council, or depending on what's found, the actual progress of the whole scheme?
My understanding, Chairman, my understanding is that the applicants will talk with the Boughton Parish Council to make sure that any traffic schemes, calming schemes, will be considered then in advance of anything going into place. This is really hoped for, because obviously it is felt, as has been mentioned before, with only 2 pinch points at Boughton, at Vyse Road, and again in Moulton Lane, is not enough. And that just to send all the traffic or make it such an unpleasant place to travel through, I don't think it's going to stop everybody going through. So I think that's why the traffic will go on through.
So it's just the mitigations within the village itself.
Yes, the two things, I suppose. One is the making sure that within the village itself that the right traffic calming things. There were originally 6 traffic calming proposals. It's now gone down to 2 gateways. That's the first thing. So that really needs to be re-looked at. And the other thing, which is one which has not been looked at, is in Buckton Fields, the actual estate, which is in Boughton Parish, and that's the Spine Road, which really should be considered because we can see that there's being an absolute nightmare in the future.
Okay. And has anything been considered, because having gone through the village a few times myself, some people don't use Vyse Road, they use Howard Lane. Has anything been considered for that at all?
No, there is a bend in Howard Lane, but there is a sort of a game that motorists play, and I think they do it in a lot of other villages too, where they try to see how fast they can take corners and speed up. And it obviously needs to be during school times and so on, and it's an absolute nightmare. Boughton is a nightmare. It's an absolute. It's right on the edge of the town, and as a result of that, it's a very quick east-west. Rat run, if you like, and it's very popular to be used rather than going through Holly Lodge Drive or going back through Pittsford, which is too far away for most people to actually do an east-west run. I
ask because obviously if there are restrictions in Vyse Lane, then people will decide to go another way. That's the nature of the game.
This is the big hope, isn't it? This is the absolute big hope that the Vyse Road pinch point there is going to be enough to stop it, but I don't know, and time will tell. But with the projected amount of traffic it's going to go through Boughton, I think it's a nightmare waiting to happen.
Yeah, no, my point was that they might decide to use Howard Lane, which would not be be restricted, and that's not particularly suitable. But anyway, that's answered the question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other councillors got anything to say? Stuart? No? Well, thank you very much indeed, Councillor Shepherd. Much appreciate you coming back. Thank you.
Okay. I'll admit the next speaker now, Chair, which is Mr. Sean Brady.
Good morning, Mr. Brady. Can you hear us okay?
Good morning. Yes, I can. Are you able to hear myself?
We are indeed, Mr. Brady. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.
You've got 3 minutes to put your points of view across. Councillors will ask any questions afterwards. And James will come in with 1 minute left of your time.
Okay.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair, councillors. My name is Sean Brady, co-chair of WASPRA. With this application, we're sleepwalking into another planning and spending disaster, like the bus station and Angel Square. We're sleepwalking past very clear facts. WASPRA's operational traffic assessments, which clearly show gridlock is certain. The proposed Brampton Lane Welford Road roundabout is without question a danger, with its heavy goods vehicles trying to navigate its multi-lane layout. For this flawed attempt at mitigation, there's increased danger. This road will cause traffic to push down the various rat runs used by children making their way to school. It's only a matter of time before the first child casualty. There is a clear underestimation of data in the application, using its hypothetical data and explanations from the applicant that are frankly fatuous. We may be sleepwalking into this decision because we think that there is no alternative to approving this plan today, because it is required to enable further housing development. But there is an alternative. Begin this plan again from the start and submit it alongside plans for a full northern orbital. Address the very valid points from WASPRA, Boughton Parish, the NBC committee and the councillors who have already been bold enough to cite the application's failure. If this road's purpose is to accommodate new housing development, then it is all the more vital that this is done right. Any small benefits from the current plan will be negated by the congestion that will spread from its impact in the Kingsthorpe area. Councillors, please do not base your decision on the illusion that housing development will be hindered if we request this application is redrawn. If anything, doing it properly means we can commit to future developments with more momentum, and we won't need to further invest in correcting this tragic plan. Thank you.
Thank you indeed, Mr. Brady. Councillors, do you have any questions to from Mr. Brady? No, nobody wants to ask you anything there, Mr. Brady. So thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, Councillor McInnes has managed to rejoin the meeting now and would like to finish her
Yes, please.
statement, if that's okay.
Are you there, Mrs. McInnes?
Chair, I think she may be having difficulty starting her microphone, so perhaps we could move on to the next speaker and we'll see if that can be resolved in the meantime.
Yes, please.
Okay, next speaker. Next speaker present, Chair, is Mr. John Cutler, so I can admit. What?
Is that Mrs. McInnes in there as well? Okay. Are you there, Mr. Cutler? We seem to have
Apologies, Chair. I don't know if it was me. It might have been. I think my trigger finger may have slipped, and I may have admitted everybody rather than the one I'd intended. So that's why a lot of people appeared all of a sudden. I'll just go through to make sure that we only have the people we should of the public speakers, which I think is case. And yes, we have Mr. Cutler as well.
Okay. So, are you ready for Mr. Cutler? You have to unmute yourself, Mr. Cutler. No, you still have to unmute yourself. Mr. Cutler, you have to unmute yourself. No, Mr. Cutler, we can't hear you. Mr. Cutler, we can't hear you. Sorry. Can we get a message to Mr. Cutler at all? James?
It might help if you press the space bar, then you can unmute yourself for as long as you pressed it. It's an additional tool.
We can't hear you, Mr. Cutler.
Yeah, Chairman, we can try and get a message to him. If you want to move to the next speaker.
Come back to you, Mr. Cutler. Over to you, James.
Yeah. So next speaker is Councillor Rumans, Chair.
We normally can hear Mr. Rumans.
Hello.
Good morning, Mr. Rumans. Thank you for coming to the meeting.
Thank you for having me.
You've got 3 minutes to put your points across, and then members of the committee can ask any questions after that. James will come in with 1 minute to go towards the end.
Yep, that's fine. Okay.
Over to you, Mr. Rumans.
Cool. So for anyone that doesn't know me, I am Councillor Sam Rumans. I represent the Kingsthorpe North Division on the County Council. I just want to rattle through a few very clear points. I don't want to step on anyone else's toes because I don't want to repeat what I'm saying. Join the meeting. Okay, first point, we have a misleading consultation. So originally this project was put together as part of a wider project with the Northern Orbital Road, a project that was meant to take us and complete the loop around Northampton almost completely. What has happened is we had a consultation on that and on that premise and got results from that that were broadly positive, but with a number of issues that have been highlighted by Boughton and others. What's then happened is due to funding issues and the unreliability of knowing whether the orbital part is going to go ahead, the Northwest Relief Road has been taken forward as a standalone project. And as far as I can understand it, we haven't really had a proper consultation on just the Northwest Relief Road. And what we have to think about here, councillors, when you're making your decision on the basis of the Northwest Relief Road as a standalone. This is not the Northwest Relief Road as part of a wider project. And as many others have explained before me, as you will have seen from the figures, as many will explain after me, the impacts of this on traffic, pollution, safety on roads, and all the rest of it is massively negative if we have the Northwest Relief Road as a standalone. That's undeniable, absolutely undeniable. I know that there is said to be cumulatively, there's on balance a better situation, but if you look at the small improvements that you get in some areas, yes, they might add up overall to more than the negatives, but the negative you get is so significant on certain areas, it's completely, it's ridiculous and it's very much unreasonable. So the second part is to say it's basically an unmitigable project. You can't mitigate against something that is fundamentally flawed, and it is fundamentally flawed. So we can add an extra lane here, we can change the traffic lights there, an extra roundabout, whatever it might be. Bottom line is that won't change the fundamental principles of the issues with the road. And so for that reason, it cannot go ahead in its current form. Bottom line, that I'd like to see, I want to see a dual carriageway orbital system going around Northampton so we can open up as much economic development opportunity as possible. More houses, more businesses, more prosperity for our town and improvement to the south.
1 minute, Chair.
Thank you. So just to then go on, advocacy. There's been a massive advocacy with this project, and basically it's been a case of, okay, how much money have we got? What resources do we have available? What can we do with it? As opposed to saying, what problem do we have? What do we need to solve? And then what can we put in place to deal with that? That's not been the case. And so everything has just been pointed and adjusted and tilted towards getting this project through, whatever the cost of it is, cost of it being a very bad situation. And just to go through a couple of other points, this project, it was said earlier, this is intended to improve and it's part of big development opportunities. Well, it's going to make the situation worse. It's going to cause issues with development. People are going to buy new houses. They're going to be on gridlock roads. It just doesn't make sense. Let's go back to the drawing board. Let's come up with something proper and let's get a decent road with a dual carriageway that allows us proper development moving into the future. Let's not have a half-assed hack job. Thank you.
Thank you indeed, Councillor Rumans. Members of the committee, do you have any questions for Sam? Looks like you've got an early morning, Sam. So thank you very much indeed.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you for joining.
No worries, cheers, Andy.
Thank you. James?
Chair, I believe we have Councillor Charlotte McInnes rejoining by telephone this time, if you'd like to take her to finish.
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Mrs. McInnes. Thank you for rejoining.
Apologies for my internet, and thank you for bearing with me. I just had a very short amount to say. If you could let me know when I can start, that would be great.
Whenever you're ready, Mrs. McInnes.
Okay. I was simply going to ask, when WSP is wearing the hats of both applicants and local authorities, how can anyone have confidence that this application has been scrutinised properly? Of course, they're going to say that their own work is robust. The North West Relief Road is not the North West bypass. It isn't even a relief road. It will be a car park in peak times, a North West Grief Road. Please do not pass this road. Please let this committee's legacy not be a white elephant that is another example of chaotic decision-making and fiscal mismanagement in Northamptonshire. Thank you very much, and thank you for bearing with me.
Thank you very much indeed, Mrs. McInnes.
Yes.
Councillors, did you want to ask Mrs. McInnes any questions?
Yes, please, Chairman. Yes, please, Chairman. Just a quick one. She mentioned in her initial speech about damage to property, and I wonder if she could give us more information. It's not something we've been told about, but is that something that's actually happened, or is it something that she's merely fearful of?
No, if you drive through Barton, you'll see along Moulton Lane, for example, where we have an existing pinch point opposite the school, where the verges and people's gardens have been totally wrecked. And that's because of the gridlock at rush hour. People can't get through. I mean, it is a complete gridlock. So people end up driving over people's gardens just to try and to get through. And if you came through the village now, you'll see signs the parish council have put up. Some residents have put up sort of little low-lying sort of type fencing to try and prevent it. Elsewhere in the village, where the house fronts are basically on the road, where you have the sort of traditional Northamptonshire stone properties, we have a very, very tight bend at the bottom of Vise Road and Church Street. And that road, it's walls, and that road, I mean, only last year had to be reconstructed because of cars and lorries banging into it. And ironically, midway through it being rebuilt, it had to be rebuilt again because of the numbers of cars mounting the pavement. So we already in our village live in a situation where we have a pinch point, we have gridlock in peak hours, and it doesn't deter people from trying to drive through. They still try and drive through. So yes, that was my point about us already living with property damaging and very dangerous conditions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors want to say anything to Mrs. McInnes? No, in that case then, Mrs. McInnes, thank you very much indeed for your call.
And you, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. James, on to the next.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Next one is Mr. Simon Barber, and I will admit him now.
Hey there, Mr. Barber.
Chair, his camera appears to be on, but it doesn't seem that he is there, and he hasn't switched his microphone on yet.
Yes. Did you want to put Mr. Barber back into the room and we'll move on to someone else?
Okay, I can do, Chair.
Hang on.
Yes, there's a bit.
Hello, Mr. Barber. You need to unmute yourself, Mr. Barber. Mr. Barber.
Yes.
Can you hear us all right now?
Yes, I can.
Thank you for joining us, Mr. Barber. You have 3 minutes to get your points of view over to the committee.
20 minutes, did you say?
3 minutes.
Yes.
3 minutes. And the officer will come in 2 minutes into it and tell you there's 1 minute left. So there's 3 minutes in total. And the members of the committee will ask you any questions afterwards.
Yes.
When you're ready, Mr. Barber, take it away.
I'm ready now.
Thank you.
Yes. I would like to say that there is no proof that this new road will alleviate the traffic nor the congestion. It will bring in more traffic. It's especially true at junctions which jam up, causing delay to access on and off the adjacent roads. More importantly, this mode must be made to bridge the former Northampton to Market Harborough rail corridor, which we would like the English Regional Transport Association and maybe other groups would like to see reopened. Only combined with pedestrian and cycle provision alongside, since much of the old track bed is used as a pedestrian and cycle way corridor. The new reopened railway could be separated by suitable perimeter fencing, creating a green corridor. Only in the last 2 years have studies been done to examine the feasibility of reopening that line, and it courted ministerial support, but it was not followed up with applications to the government's recent rail study fund.
You there, Mr. Barber?
So I finished now. My time's up.
Thank you indeed, Mr. Barber. Members, do you have any questions for Mr. Barber, please? No one is indicating there, Mr. Barber, so thank you very much indeed for joining the meeting. We do appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, Chair, just to be clear, Mr. Barber did have some remaining. If he's said all he wishes to say, then that's fine. I just wasn't clear from what he said whether he thought you were telling him to stop.
No, I took it that he finished, but we'll clarify that with Mr. Barber. Mr. Barber, have you finished saying everything you wanted to say?
Yes.
You do have a little bit of time left.
Fine then.
Yes. Will the bridge, the new road compromise the old track bed for that particular railway line?
That's more a question later on, Mr. Barber.
Just to say, new roads tend to bring in increased traffic volumes. which are already high in Northampton.
Anything else there, Mr. Barber?
That is all I can think of.
Okay. Are you happy with that, James?
Yes, sorry, Chair. I just didn't want the member of the public to misunderstand and feel that and end up not using all of the time they had available to them.
No, that's fine. Thank you indeed, Mr. Barber. Much appreciated. Should we go to the next person, please, James?
Yes, so Chair, the next speaker is Mr. Philip Gray, who I will admit now.
Good morning, Mr. Gray. Could you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, certainly. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning, Mr. Gray. Yes, we can. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Gray, you've got 3 minutes to get your point of view over. The officer will come in 2 minutes into your presentation to advise there's 1 minute left. And then councillors can ask any questions after that. That's okay.
Thank you. Chairman, I'm a cyclist and I'm mainly going to focus on the impacts on cyclists. This scheme is defective because it ignores a significant group of road users, namely cyclists who use the road. It will have a negative effect on this group and hence on active travel. Yet you as a committee have not been given enough information to assess these impacts. They are not even covered in the revised transport assessment in August 2020. In addition, road cycling groups were not directly consulted. I therefore urge you to send the plans back until this omission is rectified. The scheme's transport assessment assumed from the outset that cyclists only use dedicated off-road cycling facilities. It only consulted groups concerned with off-road cycling and walking in this area. No count of cyclists on the road was presented, nor was any assessment made of the Welford Road's importance as a cycle route. Instead, the focus was entirely on the Brampton Valley Way. This is a busy, poorly surfaced path which doesn't even meet the requirements of off-road cyclists terribly well. But it definitely doesn't help any cyclists who want to cycle somewhere else rather than north or south. But you won't know that from what has been provided to you because cyclists on the road were never counted or discussed. The infrastructure for non-motorised users in this scheme has been designed purely to help off-road cyclists and horse riders, not cyclists who use the road. Instead, 2 roundabouts are being planned, which are extremely negative for cycling on the road. They present danger and above all, they're off-putting to less experienced cyclists. I'd also point out that the Welford Road Causeway is one of only 2 road-based routes for cyclists into the countryside from Kingsthorpe. The other one, through Boughton and Moulton, is also going to become it's already becoming increasingly congested and will be made worse by this proposal. The net effect is that cyclists will find it harder to get out into the countryside, an activity which is an integral part of encouraging people to cycle more and get fitter. There are many cycling clubs and groups in the Northampton area, yet the assessment lists only one as a key stakeholder, Sustrans, who in this area are focused entirely on the Brampton Valley Way. If the council wants to support the government's goal of increasing cycling participation, then the committee needs to send the scheme back for a proper assessment of cycling on the road, this scheme's impact on it and how that can be minimised or made positive. At present, this scheme looks like a historic mistake which fails to take the opportunity we have right now to support a shift towards low carbon travel. Ladies and gentlemen, I urge you to request a proper assessment of this scheme's impacts on active travel before you consider it again. Thank you.
Thank you indeed, Mr. Gray. Councillors, do you have any questions for Mr. Gray? There's no one indicating Mr. Gray, so thank you very much indeed for your comments.
Thanks.
Thank you. James, if you can, the next person in, please.
Next speaker, Chair, is Mr. Patrick Cross, and I will admit him now.
Good morning, Mr. Cross. Can you hear us okay? Hello, good morning, Mr. Cross. Can you hear us okay? You need to unmute yourself, Mr. Cross.
Now, is that better?
It is now. I can hear you. Good morning, Mr.
No,
Cross.
good morning, Mr. Cross. Can you hear us okay? Thank you, yes.
Bit disconcerting. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. You've got 3 minutes.
You need to unmute yourself, Mr. Cross. Okay, I've got 3 minutes. Now, is that better?
Mr. Cross, if
Yeah,
you
it is
still
now.
got
I can hear
YouTube
you.
up,
Good
can
morning,
you
Mr.
turn
Cross.
YouTube up, please?
Can you hear us okay? Thank you, yes. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Thank you very much indeed for joining.
Not quite sure what's going on there, James.
Chair,
I think he's listening on
He's
YouTube.
listening on YouTube.
Background was causing some interference.
Yes.
It's a bit disconcerting hearing your own voice.
Is that better?
It is indeed, Mr.
Yeah.
Cross. Thank you for joining us this morning. You've got 3 minutes to get your points of view across, and the officer will come in 2 minutes into your presentation to advise there's 1 minute left. At the end of that, councillors will have the chance to ask you any questions. So over to you, Mr. Cross. Thank you.
Good morning. I have been a resident of Northampton for many decades and have witnessed ever increasing levels of traffic congestion, which have long passed the points of social and safety acceptability. I am a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, and I understand traffic flow projections and capacity calculations of roads and junctions. The many traffic assessments associated with this planning application are flawed. On many accounts, here are just 5. 1, the car ownership per household is grossly underestimated. The true figure is 2.3. That means 10,000 more houses equals 23,000 more cars. 2, the single occupancy of vehicles is underestimated. The true figure is 87%. 3, the dependence on modal shift from car to public transport, cycling, walking, and car share is totally unrealistic. 4, the peak traffic flows estimates in the traffic assessments are underestimated and do not reflect the reality of business and residential expansion. And 5, the junction capacities are overestimated and do not reflect that capacities dramatically reduce during peak times. As a result, the volume to capacity ratios in the TAs are highly questionable. For example, the Vise Road A508 roundabout has a realistic volume to capacity ratio of 1.7, which is gridlock. Traffic will therefore queue back up Northwest Relief Road for nearly 1 kilometre, and drivers will go back to the many current rat runs expecting relief. The mitigation proposals in this application are a waste of money. They will only move congestion around the next corner. The long overdue North Northampton Orbital Road is the only sensible mitigation plan. And until this is in operation, the Northwest Relief Road should be postponed. I refer to page 6, paragraph 5.3 of your report, and I quote a condition raised by Northampton Borough Council. I quote, Northamptonshire County Council are strongly urged to promote the development of the Northampton North Orbital Road in order to achieve improvements required. End of quote. This orbital road should run from the A45 near the Panatoni complex, near junction 16 of the M1, to the A43 near Sywell. Dualed, no traffic lights, no roundabouts, but fast slip roads. Without such an orbital road built first, this Northwest Relief Road should be renamed, may I suggest, Bottleneck Boulevard. Thank you.
Thank you indeed, Mr. Cross. Councillors, do you have any questions for Mr. Cross? No?
Yes,
Okay.
Chairman.
Yes, Graham.
Mr. Cross has challenged some of the assumptions in the modelling. Can you just explain where he gets his assumptions or his base data from, as opposed to where Kia or whoever got their base data from, and why there is such a difference. It seems troubling that we should be using inaccurate data.
Okay, I mean, of the 5 elements I quoted, car ownership per household, we actually measured that. It's quite easy to do. Go down your street, take some averages, look on new developments, see how many cars are parked outside. Okay, there may be visitors, but it's certainly not near the 1.4, 1.5 that we used in the traffic assessments. It's more than 2.3. The single occupancy vehicles, very easy to measure. When we did our many traffic counts, you just count how many vehicles are passing you and how many have single occupancy. 87%, that's 5 out of 6 have single occupancy. I have to be honest, you have to ask WSP and NCC what figures they use, because I never got an answer from them. I was sort of put off with national statistics and trends and things like that. To me, traffic assessments have some fundamental measures: car ownership, single occupancy, modal shift. It would need a modal shift of 55% to bring traffic back to normality. I think the figures that have been used in traffic assessments and various policies talk about single digit figures, 5%. And I agree, we should be catching buses, we should be cycling. But say that to families in the middle of November when it's raining, they're going to say, no, I'm going to jump in my car and face the delays. 23,000 more cars with 10,000 more houses in our town and around our town. You know, that is just highly questionable. Those figures have not been reflected in these traffic assessments. The capacity figures of roundabouts, we did a study last year with Wasborough. The Vyse Road roundabout, if it's free flowing, it's got a capacity of 1,800 an hour, 1 every 2 seconds. That's a reasonable figure for safety if it's not congested. When it's congested, and we did traffic counts, it dropped to 750 an hour because people are queuing up. Doesn't sound much, does it? Maximum capacity 1 every 2 seconds, reality every 4 seconds. But when you've got a capacity of 750 and a forecasted traffic flow of 1,200, that's 400 cars that are not going to get through. 400 cars times an average of 5 meters, that's 2 kilometers of queuing. It's, I have to say, it's school children maths to work this out. Please do not be bamboozled by the clever graphs, the clever statistics, which is frightening. I try and read it. I'm a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Logistics. I understand some of these things, but there's an element of overkill with some of the information. Is the basic facts are missing. I hope that's answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Is there anything else you want to ask him, Graham?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Okay. Any other councillors want to say anything to Mr. Cross? That's not Mr. Cross. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you. James, on to the next one, please.
James has had some connection difficulties, Chair, so I'll let our next speaker, Mr. Eales, in.
Fine. Good morning, Mr. Eales. You need to unmute yourself, Mr. Eales.
Can you hear me?
We can indeed now, Mr. Eales. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
You have 3 minutes to get your points of view over. The officer will come in after 2 minutes to advise you've got 1 minute left. So it's 3 minutes in total. And then any councillors will ask you if you've got any questions at the end of it to ask you. Over to you, Mr. Eales.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Robin Isles of Fisher German Chartered Surveyors, and I represent Brian Rice Farms Partnership and Brampton Heath Golf Centre Limited, both of whom have objected to aspects of this planning application. The majority of the road will be built on my client's land, and Brampton Heath Golf Centre, an 18-hole golf course, lies immediately west of the road and will be significantly affected by it. Our clients have been in touch regularly with NCC and their contractors over several years to try and resolve their concerns. While some concerns have been addressed, some key issues remain, and because of this, our clients have submitted written objections. I wish to use this opportunity to highlight the following points directly to the committee. Firstly, we are concerned that the application makes no provision at all to protect those constructing and using the road from stray golf balls. There is no provision for a golf ball fence and no proposal to make any alterations to the design of the course to encourage golfers to aim away from the road. We have obtained specialist advice from golf course architects recommending changes to 2 holes and have shared this information with NCC. Furthermore, our clients' insurers have expressed concerns about golf balls straying, stressing the need for changes to the golf course design. It seems that NCC is content to deal with this issue as a matter of compensation. This is unsatisfactory, as it is unlikely that any compensation will be paid in time to allow mitigation measures to be completed before construction of the road starts. This presents both a health and safety risk and a threat to the operation of the golf business. We request that Planning Permission is conditional on mitigation measures being agreed with us and being in place before construction starts. Secondly, we are concerned about the impact of noise, dust and vibration on the golf course, which at the moment is very much rural in nature. I heard earlier that there's a chat about the screening, existing screening. Screening and tree planting makes no difference to noise impacts. And so for this reason, we request the following planning conditions are included. First, A, the latest low noise road surfacing is used. Provisions are included for reducing the noise and vibration. A specialist noise fence is erected and maintained by NCC where it abuts the golf course, and the provisions are included to control dust emissions. Thirdly, we request that any planning permission is conditional on adequate measures to ensure the water levels and quality and the amount of sediment in the River Nene or Nen remains as currently experienced pre-scheme, so as to preserve our client's irrigation system, which can get clogged by silt. Fourthly, we request that any planning permission is conditional on maintaining continuous access to Brampton Heath Golf Centre, including appropriate temporary and permanent signage. Fifthly, an irrigation system, including a pump, irrigation pipes and electricity cables, which currently serves the golf centre from the River Nene, will be severed by the road. We request that any planning permission is conditional on ensuring that an adequate irrigation system is maintained at all times during and after the construction of the road, and that adequate measures are taken to ensure that the system is protected from the construction and use of the road, and that my clients are granted the necessary legal rights to enable them to access, replace and maintain it during construction and thereafter. So in conclusion, the potential impact of the road on our clients' land and business interests is very significant. We urge the committee to ensure that any planning permission, if granted, makes provision for or is subject to conditions which address our clients' concerns and will help mitigate the impact of the road on what is an important local business. Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed, Mr. Eales. I do appreciate that. Councillors, do you have any questions to Mr. Eales at all? Councillor Mercer?
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Eales, you mentioned about the stray golf balls. This was something I was concerned with and asked the officers about. They replied to me that there would be a difficulty in having such a screening because of the trees. Do you have any input on that, please?
Well, thank you. A good question. There are a number of mitigation measures that can be looked at. I mean, one option is a fence to stop golf balls flying from the tee across the road. But there are disadvantages to a fence. As you say, it will be difficult to put one up where there are trees, and also it interferes with birds and bats and that sort of thing. So our sort of preferred option really is to alter the design of two of the holes on the golf course, so that golfers are encouraged by, you know, positioning of ponds and landscaping to aim away from the road. And that was the basis of the report, which we, well, that was the recommendations contained in the report that we've submitted to NCC. The trouble is, of course, is that those alterations may well in themselves require planning permission, and of course, those alterations are not included in the application that sits before you, so to put these recommendations into effect is going to take time, will be delayed, and my concern, my client's concern, is that you know, they'll be happening long after the golf course construction starts, or indeed even the road opens to the public.
Thank you indeed.
Chairman, thank you for that. It was indicated that there would be some necessity to move a couple of the, to reconfigure the golf course in that respect, as you said. Would that be a long task? You indicated there that might take quite a while and need planning permission in itself. I'm not being an expert on golf. I'm not sure, you know, how big a job that is. And it was also mentioned that there would be negotiations with the golf course regarding these matters.
Yes, I mean, it would be inaccurate of me to say that we haven't been in negotiation with NCC and their contractors on alterations to the design of the golf course. As it stands, though, there is no agreement as to the works that need to be done, or indeed who's going to pay for them. And the nature of the works in itself will determine whether or not planning permission is required, which in turn will mean, you know, will dictate the amount of time that the works are going to take. I can't give you I can't give you an answer just now as to how long the works would take, but at a guess, you know, we're talking months, I would have thought. And of course, we'd have to be carefully coordinated with the golf course, because of course we don't want to discourage people from playing golf during the upheaval.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, thank you.
To the club compensation.
Yes, please, Chairman.
Any other councillors?
Yes, please, Chairman.
Mr. Reels. Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yes, you've mentioned a number of discussions with the council or Keir, and some submissions you made. I wasn't clear from your initial speech whether you've actually been had those various requests actually requested or just deferred, and you gave us a number of potential planning conditions. Have you submitted those, you know, specimen conditions in writing to the councils, you know, fully worded, so that we can see those?
Well, the two parts to that question. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think the first part was the degree to which we have engaged with NCC over our concerns over the design of the golf course. Is that right?
Well, it was more to do with their reaction and what their answer was to the engagement.
Okay, well, yeah, they've. Thank you. So the first part, we supplied a copy of our specialist report to them some months ago now. They've had a look at that and they've come back with some alternatives. Well, they've come back with some comments on it, but what we don't have is, as it stands, you know, there's been no agreement as to the design changes. by NCC. And of course, there is still a great deal of uncertainty because depending on what those design changes are, will determine whether or not planning permission is required. And of course, that would form a separate application. So there have been discussions, but there's been no agreement and there's been no clear undertaking from NCC to either put in place or to pay for alterations to the golf course. So that's point one. Sorry, and just remind me the second part of your question.
But you gave us some suggested conditions, but have you fully worded those and submitted them?
The answer is I haven't fully worded those. We have, of course, made written representations originally, and I can, if it's helpful, supply a copy of what I've said to you today by email. I can do that later today, if that would be helpful.
I'm asked because if we're minded to look at conditions, I mean, obviously you need to have continual access. You need to make sure that flooding doesn't occur. You need to make sure that the electrics are connected and those sort of things. And we need to have fully worded conditions. Should we be minded to look at for a later decision? That's the reason.
Well, I can certainly supply fully worded conditions if I'm invited to do so, yes.
Thank you.
My concern with that, Graham, is obviously we're making the decision today potentially either way. Will that come through in time?
I understand your concern, and I have the same concern. That's why I was asking if some had already been submitted or been prepared. So we'll see how we go, obviously, when we get to debate.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other councillors? That's it, Mr. Eales. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you very much. Cheerio.
Thank you. Can we move on to the next speaker, please, Paul?
Yes, Chair. Mr. Isles was the last speaker, but we do have John Cutler has rejoined, who was unable to speak earlier, so I'll let him in now.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Cutler. Can you unmute yourself, please? Are you able to unmute yourself, Mr. Cutler? No, we need to be able to hear you, Mr. Cutler.
Mr. Cutler, if you can't see an option to unmute, you can press and hold the space bar and that should unmute you.
Mr. Cutler, we still can't hear you. Can you press your space bar, please? Mr. Cutler, we still can't hear you.
Chair, is it possible for somebody to explain to him how you do it from the bar?
Yeah.
Chair, I believe my colleague has been in contact on the telephone to Mr. Cutler.
Oh, okay.
Should we put Mr. Cutler back in the waiting room?
I've done that, Chair.
Okay. Can we have our next speaker, please, Paul?
I believe that concludes the speakers, Chair. I don't think we have any further speakers and certainly no one in the waiting room.
Okay. So shall we just give a few minutes for Mr. Cutler?
try and readmit him to the meeting if you want me to, Chair.
Thank you.
Hello.
Success, Mr.
Hello.
Cutler. Good morning.
All right. I'm very sorry about all that.
That's fine, Mr. Cutler. It's technology. Thank you very much for joining us. You've got 3 minutes to give your views to the committee. 2 minutes into your views, the officer will step in and say there's 1 minute left. And then at the end of that, council will have the chance to ask you any questions. That's
Right.
3 minutes to you, Mr. Cutler.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Well, I live at Chapel Brampton, and for the last 35 odd years, I've been cycling into Northampton for work and shopping and so forth. I'm retired from work now, but I still often use a bike to go shopping. But I mean, this is not just a personal matter. I mean, I'm an example of the cycling that could happen if there was more encouragement and less discouragement. I mean, it's an important part of policy, although it's been very much ignored in this proposal. So the simple starting point that I've got is that when the road's constructed, it will be too dangerous to cycle into Kingsthorpe. And it would be very inconvenient to get off and try and use the press button crossing. So, I mean, probably just wouldn't bother to do that. I mean, it's been county council policy for decades that cycling should be encouraged. And the transport strategy has one of its main points is the importance of modal shift. And I mean, you've already heard how many people are single occupant car users, and there has to be some attempt to get some of those into active travel and of course public transport. I mean, this is obviously it's in the West Northamptonshire Joint Core Strategy. That policy C1 is modal shift, as well as the C5 that's referred to in the officer's report for improving cycling networks. So the officer's report suggests that cycling is well catered for in the proposal, but that is absolutely not the case. I just flatly deny that that is the case. It wrongly states that the existing causeway will provide a good route for non-motorised users, but it will be a very substandard path up a steep embankment, and cyclists would have to share it with horses, and that is just completely unacceptable as a cycle route for most people used to riding on the road. So when, if you read the officer's report, you find that when providing for bats and badgers, the first thing they do is a survey to find out how many there are and where they're going. But there has been no survey or count of cyclists. The residents of Boughton complain that the estimates of traffic are inadequate, but for cyclists, there has been no count whatsoever, and they can't take them from computer models because they're not in computer models either. So it's the majority of cyclists who are riding on the roads out from Northampton and around Northampton that are completely ignored in all the documents and in the design. And this is contrary to national guidance and to local policies. Another thing that's been ignored is the public sector equality duty, because it's important to look at that because there's a lot of families and elderly and child cyclists using the Brampton Valley Way. And on the equalities impact assessment form, all the boxes are just ticked as showing no impact, but clearly that's not true at all because they'll be crossing this very busy, fast road. And so I would ask that the scheme should not be granted planning consent unless there is a proper assessment of cycle traffic and a redesign of the provision for it. And at the very least, there should be a planning condition that there is proper provision for cyclists designed to the new guidance that was recently issued by the Department for Transport. And this has been asked for by Northampton Borough Council. They have asked for conditions on any planning permission in respect of impacts on active travel and sustainable transport. And also the Daventry District Council has mentioned the need to protect Brampton Valley Way. So you've got conditions for bats and badgers and everything else you can think of, but there are no conditions presently suggested in the officer's report to have a proper design for cyclists. I think this is the absolute minimum, although obviously we'd like...
Apologies, we're over time.
We'd like the scheme to be redesigned altogether, but the minimum really is to have a proper...
Sorry, Mr. Cutler. 1 second, please. Sorry, Paul, was that out of time?
That's correct, Chair.
So, Mr. Cutler, you've used up all your time there.
Right, thank you very much.
Just stay there 1 second, if you will. Councillors, do you have any comments you want to speak to Mr. Cutler about? No? In that case then, Mr. Cutler, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. So I just want to clarify, Paul, that is all the speakers we've listened to.
That's correct, Chair. That's everybody on my list.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Can I come back to you, Phil, and answer any of those questions that have been raised by the speakers?
Chairman, before we get into that, would it's been 2 hours now, would it be time for perhaps a short comfort break?
You can do. I was going to do it after he sums up the questions to the speakers before we had our debate. That was all.
I just think that would probably take quite a while. So
okay, if everyone's happy then, shall we take a 10-minute break?
Okay.
Excellent. 10 minutes it is then. Thank you very much.
I'll stop the live stream now and restart it in 12:10.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Paul.
Okay.